Round two. Why is Twitter not working? I wonder what the deal is. What's up, gang? Oh, wait. Good thing I didn't go to that. That was a click mistake. Remove. How you guys doing? We got a little like double feature action today. I had Emily on the show, and then we have Dr. Sean Rockett coming in talking to us a little bit about some competitive sports side injury talk. So we'll talk a little bit about like the difference. We talked about it last time where we discussed kind of like what coaches and affiliate owners should know when it comes to like injuries in CrossFit, right? And we touched base a little bit as we started to move towards the sports side. Like Seth Page actually had a really great question, and he was asking about rebounding box jumps. And essentially, like, is it like the risk worth it, or should you not do it? Should you do it? Is like, how bad is the injury there? And or how bad can you be exposed to injury doing that movement? And basically he was like, yeah, don't do it, because whenever your foot is at like this like flexed angle and you like rebound back off of it, that's when like there's a rupture in the Achilles and where it could just like split off the bone. And it was crazy to learn that, because there's been a couple of times when I've done some box jumps, like rebounding box jumps happen to be like a really good movement for me. And so I would do them all the time and like speed up in the workouts and stuff. And like, as the last couple of times I did them, I started to get like almost like this like swelling back behind my Achilles, where like it would feel like super tender. Not like sore, but almost like worse than sore. Like it had been inflamed, almost like hit by something. And so ever since then, I was kind of always like weary, but I never had any issues with it. I would like warm it up and it would be fine. And then after the conversation about the rebounding box jumps with Dr. Sean Rockett, I've decided that probably stepping down would be best for me. There's no way I would go crazy trying to have to live in some sort of like crutches or immobile position for any length of time when it came to an injury because of a rebounding box jump. It just ain't worth it. I know some of you guys probably still rebound your box jumps. I'm curious as to how this is going to go. Hi, Karin. See the last show? Two of them back to back, like warmed up now, you know, short break in between. But I didn't really want to move either of these shows. I had already had Dr. Sean Rockett scheduled from prior, and the discussion that we had last time was really cool. A lot of people seemed to get a lot out of that episode. We took it and I clipped it into like a few different clips, and Dr. Sean Rockett threw it on his Instagram and stuff, and one of them went nuts. We ended up getting like almost 400,000 views, like 350 something maybe, or like maybe a little less than that, maybe like 325. And then Dave took the clip and reposted it on his the TDC Instagram, and then that ended up with like roughly right around the same amount. And so it was crazy about how much attention that clip got, and some of the comments and different things like on that. I'm curious as to, it's funny too, and we'll talk to Dr. Rocket about that. But one of the things is like he like actually took the time and like went through and like commented like back and like really wrote some of these thoughtful responses back to some of them. And like if you look at some of my responses, they're just like sarcastic, kind of like not rude, but let's just say Dr. Sean Rock gave much more thoughtful, insightful answers than I did. I basically was just like, F off. I don't care what you think anyways. But whenever you get a clip that makes the rounds like that and just gets obviously reach on people's explore page and what have you, like there's going to be a lot of people that are going to have their opinions on it. And sometimes people just comment shit just because, they just want to either write something that they think will catch attention, or maybe they're just pissed off that day, or we're just whatever, had an opinion. But I used to do this thing a lot with Jerry News. It was like a popular news account on Instagram, and I would set notifications onto it, and it would alert me ahead of time that post got made, and I would go on there and I'd see it, and I was like, okay, can I make some sort of like comment that would either piss people off? Some people might think it's funny. If you read it, it's kind of sarcastic. It's usually like ambiguous, so you can't really tell if I'm like for or against whatever the content is. But you have to do it within inside like the first 2 minutes. And if you do it and you do a comment correctly, you'll start to get some engagement. And then typically if you get like a couple comments or replies back, then more and more people will get to see it and get like, you'll get likes on it. So it was kind of like a game Sevon and I used to play like a year ago or so, because when he started realizing that I was doing it, he's like, wait, I want to do that. So he would try to do the same, and we'd like compare how many likes we got. And I had an opportunity to do it on this Andrew Schultz clip. It's a pretty funny joke. Actually, I think I could probably Andrew Schultz. Are you guys a fan of Andrew Schultz? His ability to like riff with the crowd, but not only riff with the crowd, but riff with a crowd like in different cultures and be able to connect with them is like second to none. This guy is just is a genius when it comes to that. Yeah. Oh, you know what's funny too? Oh, maybe it's because the account doesn't follow me, but my comment doesn't even show up on here, even though it has the most likes. That's crazy. Okay. Well, here's the clip. This is the clip. You guys can see it. By the way, this has absolutely nothing to do with the show. We'll talk about it in about 4 minutes, but I just thought you guys might think it's funny.
With a beer, and there was a cop that was like, "You got to go back inside." And I was like, "Why?" He goes, "You can't drink beer outside. I'll have to give you a ticket." I'm like, "There's a guy shooting heroin in his eyeball right next to you."
Welcome to San Francisco.
Even the heroin addict was like, "Nah, you got a point. It makes no sense. We should fix that." They're so flexible, them heroin addicts, bro. I don't think I'm flexible enough to be on heroin. Every one of them can touch the floor, right? Like, this is as far as I go. Even if I was on heroin, you wouldn't think. You'd be like, I think he lost something. You know what I mean? But they are like, fuck. They fold in half. They're like a wallet. Does heroin loosen up the hamstrings? What is... I don't need yoga. I need heroin. Apparently, I almost got a ticket the other day.
So, anyways, I saw that and I was like, "Oh, that's funny." And I caught it within the first like minute. So I put this comment here and I said, "It's pronounced fentanyl now," and I got 2,300 likes on it. It's funny too. I had to go down to like in 13 replies. I had to go down to like pretty far in these comments to get that. Even though, look, it's like the closest one next to me is 673, 665. That's still less. 283, 264. 35, 31. Yeah, 550. Like none of these, it put mine all the way down here. But it has a massive more engagement and likes than any other comment above it. That's kind of interesting, right? I wonder if it has to do because I put the word fentanyl there. So like it buried that comment. But you would think that Instagram would populate the comments that are getting the most engagement. But apparently it's not, that's kind of funny. Also, dude, this is on the Sevon Podcast Instagram account. So their that account doesn't follow anybody but our sponsors. It doesn't follow me or anything like that. So I wonder if that had to do with it. But that's just weird that it would like bury it underneath all those comments. What are the ones that it populate? Oh, I know for a reason people are taking heroin, don't start fights and make a scene. Am I right? They'd be stretched out. Vancouver is a land of yoga. Okay, whatever. Anyhow, I thought you guys would think that that's pretty funny. Like the Andrew Schultz bit, not necessarily that my comment got some engagement. But we got some cool topics that we're going to be discussing with Dr. Sean Rockett. He brought up some good points when we were kind of like talking a little bit back and forth about just some of the subject material that we want to get into on the show. Obviously, I want to dive into a ton of the stuff like with the games and different athletes that we know have gotten hurt over the years. The main question that I have for him is like, who makes the call, right? So we saw Roman and stuff like that in the past get hurt and still kind of continue on. There's obviously certain injuries that happen where like people can no longer continue on due to the fact that like, you know, you remember Brooke with her elbow. There's no way if she wanted to or not, like she was no longer going to be in the competition from that point forward, right? So I'm curious as to like, you know, kind of a peek back behind the curtain or so as to like what that looks like. How are those like decisions are made? How much of like the athlete's opinion is actually taken into consideration, and as well as we'll get into a couple things about weightlifting and like young people doing it, which I think is actually a great topic because you hear a lot of mixed things about it all the time, right? Is it bad for you? Does it stunt their growth? Is it too early to start? What should kids do and what kids shouldn't do? So with no further ado here, we'll bring Dr. Sean Rockett into the show now, and we'll hit the little applause button because you know we bring on applauses when we have our guest here. Hello, sir. Welcome back.
Hello. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can. You sound great. How's your day going so far?
Great. Had a full day of surgery and things are good. I just have to do one more little thing here. Let me
Oh,
just
no
do that.
problem. Like we talked about it a little bit last time, and I was like, man, it's just like such a crazy experience. Like I get up and I'm like, oh, got to coach my class and stretch them out right. And you're like, oh, I'm just going to slice somebody open and sew together their shoulders. Talk about different responsibilities.
Oh,
Um,
sorry about this.
no
Someone's
problem.
just someone's
No,
just getting to me. There we go.
no
All right,
problem.
cool.
Zachary
Cool.
Cadoo's in the chat. Zachary, what's up, man? What's up, Matt? What's up,
How we
Sean?
doing? You doing all right?
Doing fantastic. Feeling good here. I
Good.
was just riffing a little bit, chatting with the crowd here, and I was talking about how you completely changed my box jump for forever. What do you think about box jump? What do you think
I'm
of
glad. I'm glad to do that. Glad to
Well,
help you.
it was funny because the reason why Seth Page had actually asked that question in our comments. That's a buddy of mine, has his own show with Jump Ship, and he had asked the box jump question about rebounding, and like
Yeah.
box jumps used to be like my not used to be, still are technically, but like that was like my bread and butter. If I knew that I had a box jump in the workout, the more the better. I could rebound them quick. I could make up a lot of
Filthy
time in
50,
there.
get through filthy 50
Oh,
without thinking about it. Sure.
crush it, yeah. And at like lately over the last few months, what I'd done, I had this really weird, like, it was like my Achilles almost felt like swollen to the touch, like it had gotten hit or something afterwards. And I was like, that doesn't quite feel right. But I'd warm it up and, kind of just throw it to the wayside. Like, it's warming up. It feels good. And after
Yeah.
one of the box jump workouts I did, I was thinking to myself, like, man, maybe I should pay more attention to that. And maybe I should adjust my movement here a little bit, because if that thing goes, I do so much that if I try to like be, sedentary for any period of time to let that injury heal, that'll really be a setback for me. So anyway, Seth asked the question last time you were on and you answered it. You're like, yeah, I mean, risk worth reward. Don't like, why
Don't
would you,
just don't.
would you expose yourself to that risk, that potentially injury that would bring you out of work for a long period of time, would have to make a
Yeah.
ton of investments. I had one of my buddies actually got that injury playing a game of flag football on Thanksgiving randomly. And to watch him kind of go through and be out for a period of time, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to take Doc's advice here and just step down from now on. It might slow my time down, but you know what? I'll take that over any day over an injury. So
Well, a lot of people on those comments, they were like, well, they're grilling me and asking questions, and like, I can't, others, it happens in other sports too. I'm like, of course it does. Like, like, I'm not saying this is the only way you could tear your Achilles, but like, there's a higher risk that I have seen. And I'm just speaking from my personal opinion. I have seen a higher risk of people rebounding and
yeah,
tearing their Achilles.
yeah.
So, but yes,
And
other sports, surely you can tear your Achilles in other sports too.
yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? It's just, but it's funny because when we go back and we talk about, and I was just talking with the audience at that clip that we had put up that was like, well, is CrossFit more dangerous than other exercise modalities or extra
Yeah,
sports, right? Caught a ton of attention. I think
that got a
between,
little bit of attention, huh?
yeah, I think between like the one that we had and then Dave reposting ours on his other account, I think it was like up over, more than 500,000 views and collectively probably closer to like 750,000.
Yeah.
And, I was like, holy shit, and you were so good and patient with people. Like some of my responses were like, can you define what you're saying? And like, just almost like combative. And you were so nice. You're like, yeah, here's the research. Okay, I'll email it to you. Here's what I was referencing. And I'm like, that's why you're the doctor. And I'm just the talking head on the internet.
Take 5 seconds, breathe deeply before you reply.
That's right. You were
Read
so
it
good with
again.
it.
Read it again. Do not push the enter button until you read it twice to make sure.
I need a cooling off period.
That's my philosophy out there.
Well, another thing that I should take away from the show is your response, your comment response philosophy. Read it twice, take a breath, set it down, then maybe come back and press send if you still feel like it's worth it. But yeah, did you expect that clip to kind of get that much? I mean, there's a lot of people that interacted with it and had that attention, right?
I just thought it was going to be, one of my regular reels from 321 Go MD, and it caught fire. I'm still getting like 40 to 50 likes a day on it, and reposts it's crazy. It's more than I've ever seen. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was so many different mixed like response on there. Some people were like, "Oh, this is great. Oh, this makes sense," kind of like affirming some of the stuff. Other people went the full other way and was like,
Yeah.
some comments were just like, "This is dumb. This makes no sense." And then other people were a little bit more thoughtful and were like, "Hey, I want to dig a little bit deeper. What were you referencing here? What were you talking about?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, did you actually take the time to send over? I mean, you put some really thoughtful responses to a few of those comments.
Yeah, I provided the article that, some of the articles that I was referencing in the literature on National PubMed and Journal of Kinesiology, and I think it was Journal of Sports and Conditioning. I think was the other one. But yeah, there's research that backs it up. Like, people are like, oh, and I remember in the line it said like through other people's research and literature and studies in the literature, and people are like, yeah, bullshit. I'm like, no, really, there are other people's studies out there. Like, I'm not just saying this because I'm the CrossFit medical team doctor. Like, I've been doing it for 17 years. I'm trying to stay healthy, trying to stay avoidance of injury, and you just got to be reasonable about it. But that's
Yeah,
the thing. Not every CrossFit injury is catastrophic, and not every running injury is catastrophic. Certainly, running injuries, usually Achilles tendonitis, can be stress fractures of the tibia, can be stress fractures of the hip. I've seen people break their hips running,
yeah.
spontaneous hip fracture running. So I've never seen that with CrossFit, but anyway.
It's funny too. A while back, I read something about the explosion of running becoming really popular in China. And it was one of these things like it was something with like they had like a handful of marathons and half marathons that were done. And within like a year's time, it was like a 5,000% increase. Like they were popping up every weekend, it seemed like somewhere.
Oh, wow.
And that would definitely be an interesting data set to look at, because I heard that kind of went this really big rise. And then very quickly, people just started dropping off and getting injured because they went from 0 to, 60, 50 miles a week overnight. And that accumulation of volume really does take a toll.
Sure. No, definitely. You get overuse tendonitis and then into shin splints and then into stress fractures. Sure.
Yeah. And there was probably a really good explosion of running shoes. So somebody probably made a killing out there on that. From selling hardly any to a bunch. But I liked we were kind of discussing prior, and I think you brought up some really great stuff about in terms of weightlifting and when kids should get involved with it. And we've been for the last year or so here at CrossFit Livermore, we've been running our youth program called ACEs. And basically what it is it's a super foundational level introduction to weightlifting, where typically we'll just have them do some sort of back squat, some sort of deadlift, and some sort of overhead press. Once we have a couple weeks of that, we end up moving them to like bench press, push press. We'll introduce front squat. And then typically right at the end, we'll introduce like the hang power clean or something. And a lot of the questions that we get from some of the parents, and now granted, I want to make clear for the audience so that way they know, we have a lot of 10-pound barbells. We have a lot of 15-pound barbells. So sometimes when people hear often like deadlift, squat, and press, they immediately imagine all this weight on the bar and these kids like struggling to get it. And unfortunately, we kind of see that a lot in some of our high school PE classes. But the question we get often is like, hey, you said this was available for kids at 12 years old. Like, is it safe for my, son or daughter to start weightlifting at this age?
Yeah. Yeah. The study always comes up, people with open growth plates, kids before age 14, 13, 12 have open growth plates. And the question always comes up, is it safe? And through the literature out of Boston Children's Hospital, Lyle McKaylee did a study looking at weightlifting in children and growth plate issues, and there was no deleterious effect to growth plates with children lifting with open growth plates. The folklore, just like a lot of things, like, if you look at a lot of things in medicine, there was folklore about not lifting early because they thought it stretched out your ligaments too much. Just like squatting below 90. Is it safe to squat below 90 degrees? That used to be in the 50s. There was a guy who put an article out there who thought it would stretch out your ligaments too much and tear your meniscus at the same time. And so that sort of became the way that people thought of, like, you shouldn't squat below 90. And that was just a It was one of these things that just got passed on. There was an article on it in Sports Illustrated in like I think the 60s or the 70s or something like that. And people just sort of said, okay. and then until we just sort of realized that it is not doing that. And some of the science that was done out of Boston Children's is one article that I know of. I'm sure there are other articles, but that's one that I remember in residency looking at and saying that, open growth plates. And again, like anything, you got to be reasonable. You can't expect kids to start PRing their deadlifts in, crazy numbers. Like moderate weightlifting, aerobic activity with weightlifting is a reasonable thing to do for a young kid trying to get in shape for the summer sports and for life.
Yeah, and one of the things that we always stress, like when they bring their kids into ACEs, they're like, "Hey, is this going to help them with like sport X or Y?" And I always just say yes, and they're like, "But you said it helped the kid with baseball, but my son's in basketball," and I'm like, "Yes." And
Yes.
it's like it's one of
Yes.
those exactly. They need like that foundational level of lifting. But one of the things that I've struggled with, and maybe you could give me a little insight on some information on your opinion on this, is in terms of okay, so let's say we have a child, let's say they're age of 13. Okay. They've been lifting with me for about 4 weeks and clearly they're getting competent in their mechanics. We see a lot of consistency in their lift. It really looks good. Like at what point, if any, at that age, should we start to allow them to test the limits of what they could actually lift? So meaning like if they could do 50 pounds and it looks great, I typically always keep them in sets of 5 because I'd rather see them do consistency than a 1 rep max. So in that context of like, hey, they've normally done 50 pounds, they could probably go up. They did 60, it looked great. Like, do we kind of let them see the limit or do we want to have some sort of governor on the amount of weight that's being lifted, assuming mechanics still look okay?
I guess it kind of depends on, obviously looking at numbers, it depends on where they start. Like, I would expect a trajectory like this. And of course, at some point it's going to plateau. But, to lift easily and comfortably and not even think about it. And then to get into your moderate, stress level. I wouldn't take a young kid and put them at like a max level or a heavy level. But if they're every set they've done looks boring and stupid and easy, then that is a reasonable thing to keep going. I always say it's better to, say, oh, I wish I lifted more than, oh, why did I lift that? That was stupid. So every day should be, maybe I can lift more, 2 days, 2 weeks from now or a week from now. The kids are so young, they don't need to go up, with heavy weights to get the response, to get the benefit of it. They can get cardiovascular, they can get muscular tone, tendon strength, bone, strength. So with little kids, I certainly would shy away from heavy weights and keep the weights. If the kids are like, wow, look what I can do, they start going in their great form and they got good technique. Yeah, sure. Let them lift more. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And that's typically like what we do with them, right? So anytime we start to see mechanical breakdown, and I always make the joke because, typically it's not all boys that are in the class, but I would say it's majority of them, right? And all of them are competitive and they get in their sports, and then one person does, one lift, and then the other kid comes over to their bar and like they're trying to push each other a little bit. And a little bit of that is okay. But I always make the joke. I walk around the weight room and they always know I tell people all the time, I want to strip some weight off that bar. And so like the running joke is if I see any breakdown in mechanics, let's say we're talking about a deadlift, do we start to see the hips rise too early? If I start to see any roundness in the back, like I will tell them immediately they got to drop the bar down and they got to strip some weight off. And their whole entire goal is to never let me strip weight off their bar, meaning they've never pushed past the point of like mechanical breakdown. And go ahead.
The other one, have you thought about the Rockett Shield?
No, do explain.
It's 1995, and it is a cover that covers your weights.
Really? So you don't know what you're actually lifting?
You don't know. Well, you know what you're lifting, but no one else can see what you're lifting.
Oh, so then it keeps them all kind of blind to each other, so we don't get this little competitiveness back and forth. Yeah, because that's what happens. One kid
I'm
does
kidding
whatever.
about the Rockett Shield. I've thought about it, you know, because I know, like people like you look and you see your best friend go over there and he picks up the 35 and you're like, oh, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
it
And then
happens. It happens. I know it happens, but especially with young kids. Young kids are competitive, and they, you know, that's when you really as a youth coach, you really have to be on top of these kids. You
that's
can't
right.
let them chase somebody else.
No, or start chasing numbers. And I tell them all the time too, like the joke that I always make is I'm like, what's the rush? Because they're like,
Oh,
oh,
you got
what if,
plenty of time. You
yeah,
got 90 years to do this.
that's right. So when they're like, oh, I want to get to like 300, I'm like, what's the rush? I'm like, dude, numbers are infinite. And that fight and that chase never ends. You're going to get to 300, then you're going to want to, 405 because I got 4 plates on each side. Oh, you know, so it's just continuous. And I always tell them like the one who focuses on the mechanics and the consistency the most will end up the strongest at the end of the day. The one
Yeah.
that rushes it. And that's why I'm actually really against 1 rep maxes, especially with the youth, like 100%, like we
Especially
don't
the young
even,
kids,
yeah,
definitely.
we
I
don't
agree.
even do it.
I
But
agree.
even with the adults, because at the end of the day, like if you really wanted to build true strength, you're going to do it in a set of 5. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so
Yeah.
if you're like, hey, I started CrossFit, whatever, a month ago, and I could do 100 pounds for my set of 5 back squat, and now I could do 150 pounds for my set of 5. Like you have gotten a lot stronger to be able to move that much more weight. It's not
Yeah.
about being able to be like, hey, I did my 100 for my 5, and I could do 150 for my single, and we all know it looks like crap, and you know everybody in the room is getting sweaty palms watching you lift it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
And then along that same line with the weightlifting, we used to hear this way more in the past, and this came a lot from like the weightlifting community. It's really calmed down now, but there was this kind of this misnomer going around that doing snatch or clean and jerk for like multiple reps at a time was unsafe because at some point you have like breakdown in the mechanics and we started to see like issue or something like that. Which doesn't seem to be true to me at all. Is there like, in your opinion, is there anything that has to do more so with like volume number of reps? Like, hey, we're going to do snatches, like 15 is good, but 30's, 30's unsafe or anything like that? Is it all go back to just the mechanics and the ability to lift it cleanly?
Yeah, I think, and the problem is sometimes you don't feel it till afterwards, right? So
Right.
huge volume, you got to be careful with because then the tendons can react 2 days later. You know, so an overuse, like so. There's different injuries we're talking. One is overuse, so huge volume. You might not have an injury, right? But huge volume. 2 days later, your biceps are all blown up because you did 100. You know, you did Randy, or you did 75 snatches. So you might not get the injury then, but you might feel the soreness later. Then there's the catastrophic thing, like, oh shoot, I just dislocated my shoulder because the weight was too heavy. I was fatigued. I wasn't getting under it. I was throwing it back and, crossing my fingers that my shoulders would stay, attached.
Yep. The pull and pray. Yep.
Yeah. So that's the catastrophic, and avoiding the catastrophic. Yeah. If you're really fatigued and you're doing too much, then yeah, there's a risk. You could tear your elbow. You could dislocate your shoulder. You could, do something catastrophic. And that's, talk about losing fitness, right? If you're trying to be fit and you get to the weights where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make this next rep, like, don't. Like, just don't. It's not work. Like, you are then out from a dislocated shoulder for 9 months getting back to heavy weightlifting.
Yeah,
Right? It's
that's a
6 to 8
long
months for a dislocated shoulder to get back to heavy stuff. Talk about losing fitness, right? So that temptation, that little bird or that little angel or the devil, whichever one you want to have on the side of your shoulder, you got to be real. You got to control that voice,
right.
Because you're going to lose a lot of fitness that way.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because like at any time when you are starting to feel the mechanical breakdown, it's looking sketchy, you really have to bring the main thing back to the main thing, which is like, why did you show up here and what's the purpose? And
Why am I
it's to be
doing this?
fit. Yeah, fit, healthy, make some friends along the way, have a good time doing it. Like nowhere in that list of goals is like go for that sketchy 1 rep max snatch and throw a shoulder out for like. And you're like sitting there, you're like, why? Like, and what's crazy is we've had people in the past, like nothing's been like catastrophic like that for us, knock on wood. But, you know, we've had stuff where I've walked by somebody and I'm like, hey, you should probably call it there. Like you could tell the wheels are kind of coming off the bus. And I head my way down the other side of the room and I'm doing stuff. And I look back and I'm like, that dude's got 20 more pounds on his bar. Like we just had this conversation, right? And then you just see the like the catastrophic like failure in the lift. And whenever something
even in a Metcon, right? Even in a Metcon, if it's not just a lift. There you go. Yeah, like so the tougher part, like, yeah, I mean, if it's a weightlifting day or weightlifting first half of the you know the gym hour, you know, that's easy. That's easy. Like it's like, oh, you're gonna do 3 reps of 5 clean and jerks, and you're gonna build up, you know, whatever 3 different weights, you know, but in the middle of the Metcon, that's the tougher one where you took a heavy weight and you got 5 reps of that heavy weight, and your 3rd rep is, you know, flailing and you're going backward. Like you're going to go up for 4 and 5. Like, really? Are you sure about that? Like that's the tougher voice, right? In the middle of a Metcon saying, I'm probably going to stop at 3 reps. And like, so but guess what? Like, who cares? Like you just did heavy weight. You did 3 reps of it and you showed that you've achieved your maximum fatigue. Don't do 4 and 5 if you're not going to do it. I'm sorry. Like I'm an athlete, right? I'm an athlete, but like I'm up for self-preservation too.
Yes,
You know?
yes. And I love what you had said when you were like, and it's so funny because I actually use that same exact line, which I tell people all the time when they're starting, especially if they're new to the barbell and stuff. I say, hey, if the first 10 sessions, 20 sessions, you walk out the door and then you come back and you tell me like, hey, I definitely could have done more weight last time. I'm like, great, mission accomplished. Because guess what? You could come back in, you've learned, you felt it, we could add a little bit more and we could just keep that going. And I tell people all the time, our goal is to have you come in and say that for like a lifetime. Because then we built the mechanics, you built your confidence, and we built the strength in that movement. So that way you could do it competently and safely. But oftentimes people come in and they're like, I'm just here to get fit and be happy and, you know, healthy and get my friends and blah, blah, blah. And then like 2 months into it, they got the wristbands, they got the headband. They're like, they've been watching the Rich Phoning stuff, or I guess now it'd be like Frazier or, you know, whoever. And they're coming in and they're like, I'm going to compete. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts. Is like, you know, as far as the conversation piece goes, it's like, hey, kind of remember what you come in here for. But is there a certain landmark of like, you should have confidence in these movements, or, you know, I don't want to keep anybody from some like bucket list goal or something like that. But like, how do you have that conversation? And then watching them, is there an appropriate, you know, coach stepping in to say, hey, maybe we should wait a little bit longer or find something that's more appropriate for you? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's coaching. That's all what coaching is. Like to assess somebody, to see where they are, to know their mental mindset. Like is there's different personalities out there of athletes and clients, and knowing, is one guy more I would say dangerous because he's like, I'm fine, until he's not. And then as another person, like, come on, you can do this. Like, you know, the other person, you're like, you got to give a little boost and some confidence, and they look great and they're doing well. And they're like, no, I'm going to stay here. Like, and the person who's sort of flatlining, who just sort of isn't going to move because they don't want to get hurt. Like that's another person you got to, you know, so some people you push and some people you hold back. But again, the pushing should be, you know, only if they're really good. The games, the 2-month new athlete who does the slow motion walk with the sunglasses coming into the bar. Who's the meme guy? He's got the big belly.
Yeah. Fit to serve, Evan. All right.
Yeah. He is fit to. He's got that video of, you know, 2 months into CrossFit, and he walks in slow motion with everything. And yeah, those are the people you got to be careful of. I would definitely be cautious. But can you tell, like, you know, is there, I guess that's really what a good coach is, like seeing how they move, seeing how good they are with their movements, and seeing what their improvements have been. Like, you don't want to take somebody from, you know, 20 pounds to 100 pounds. It's this slow climb. But again, that climb is going to plateau at some point, whether it's 225 clean and jerk or whether it's a 105 clean and jerk. Some people are going to plateau, and most people are going to plateau. The question is, that's the dangerous curve. Like, when are they going to plateau? Because people make great gains. They love it. That's what brings them back. They love the gains they're making, but at some point they're not going to keep making those gains. And as a coach, you got to know when that curve is.
Yeah, because at some point you get the diminishing returns, right? And then if you're not training smart, and oftentimes too, for those coaches out there, when you typically start to see that plateau or you start to see this backside, the first question I always go to is like, hey, how's the diet looking? Because we get so caught up in like volume or doing this, and chances are you could kind of bring it back to the basics, and they're like, yeah, well, I could clean that up. And I'm like, I guarantee you, if you clean that up for the next 30 days, you're going to come back in here and you're going to get better results in terms of your lifting.
Or the overtraining. The people that are doing it 7 days a week, double sessions 7 days a week. They came in, they were doing 4 days a week and loving it, and then all of a sudden you see this like little cultish look coming in on their eyeballs, and they're there 7 days a week. They don't take rest. There's no rest. And every day is the games. There are some days where you shouldn't be doing the games. You shouldn't be training for the games.
Yeah, and I try to tell people that so much. Is like, there's a difference between training and competing. And the people that show up at the gym every day that are just competing, I'm going to beat the guy next to me, I'm going to get the best time in the class and stuff like that. You're missing the envelope on actually training. And if we were to get a lot of especially our seasoned CrossFit Games athletes in here, like the Brent Bukowskis, the Pat Vellners, like the Ben Smiths, these guys that have been in it for a very long time, they would tell you right off the bat, like, they're not in there competing every single day. Right. There's periods to their training where there's more volume, there's less volume, they're slowing things down, they're focusing on certain weaknesses or tightening certain things up. And you can't just go in there and beat your head against the wall every day and compete. Right. And it's funny, back to the kids thing, and a little note when we were talking is like, a lot of times parents will come in and they get worried about weightlifting. And I'm like, dude, you're worried about weightlifting for the 2 days a week they come here and do it under a controlled environment, but you got Johnny in like 10 different sports. I mean, the kid barely sleeps, right? He's up at 5. He's at the swimming. He's going over to his group baseball. He's got his traveling soccer. Like, at some point, especially when it comes to organized sports, we see this a lot. Is there, like, would you recommend that? Like, what as far as, your thoughts on, like, when is it too much with kids sports?
Yeah, it's just, it's tough. It's tough. And I was there with my kids, and I get it. And, but I told my kids, you got to pick and choose. You can't be everything. You can't be on every team. You can't be on every position. You got to pick, you got to choose. You can't be on 4 sports in a season. That's just crazy.
It just gets nuts because they have like practice for this, practice for that, a game for this, a tournament this weekend. And then at some point I'm just looking at them like, man, like, you would be better off like varying all your stuff, doing it once a week and tightening up drills and skills than you are just competing in every single sport you can get your hands on.
There's the pressure, there's the push, there's the AAU, there's the coaches who are, trying to get recruited. And, I get it. I understand. I know what it's all about. But you got to, as a parent, because the kid's not going to make the decision. As a parent, well, some kids wouldn't make the decision, but as a parent, you got to step in and realize that the kid's going to say yes to everything you sign them up for. They're not going to say no to you, and it depends on your relationship with your kid. But yeah, you as a parent can't let that kid do too much. They need rest. They need healing. They need, imagine if you did that, like, you were on 4 sports in a you practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then 4 to 6 games on Saturday, Sunday. Like, come on, it's just,
it's at some point you're just like, what are we even doing here with them?
And we see it all the time. We see it all the time.
You should see, like, doctor, I got these kids in the ACEs program when they're like, oh, we're in between this. And I'm like, oh, what sport were they playing? And they give me this laundry list of stuff. And then they tell me all their private practices and everything else. And I'm like, no, hold on. Can we just get them in one sport? Like, we don't need the 30 of them there.
Did you see what Karen just posted?
Yeah, I know. I just saw that. I was like, don't you think Dr. Rockett looks like Derek Shepherd from Greg's Anatomy? I thought that was hilarious. Not super familiar with the show, but I'm sure he's a good looking stud.
I believe that's McDreamy.
Oh, okay. Okay. I know who that one is. Logan. Ewick. Dr. Rockett is a man. Helped me out so much when I broke my ankle at Wadapalooza.
Oh, Logan. Hey, buddy. How you doing?
That's cool.
Everything good?
Yeah. How's that ankle treating you? We got Kylie here. I don't imagine weightlifting would be any worse on kids than gymnastics would be with tumbling. Yeah, true. I mean, I always say, like, a lot of the parents will ask, like, hey, if you were going to kind of build up like a foundation for your kids, I always think like basic gymnastics is good, because getting to be able to control their body and stuff through space and do that before they're controlling external objects really helps build and strengthen not only full range of motion, because typically if they're at gymnastics, they're hanging, they're pushing, they're, you know, doing all these things, and that would translate over to strong range of motion when they do start moving towards like the external objects.
Yeah, and
Would you agree with that?
tumbling is a lot of running, jumping, landing, a lot of stress on the knees and the ankles. You know, tendonitis, patella tendonitis, ankle tendonitis, Achilles tendonitis from running and jumping a lot. Yeah, we see that.
Yeah, we got Rambo here. Opinions on steroid users. Their muscles get stronger than their tendons. How does the tendons need to catch up to the muscles, or how much does the
They
tendons?
tear.
Because they can't keep up with muscle growth if you're putting something in your body with it for it, right?
Yeah, there's steroids have a high incidence of causing tendon ruptures. Yes.
And that's just because the load that they're lifting, because the steroids has helped them get to that level much faster than anything else in their body, can't support the loads that their muscles can.
It can be. It can be because they're, you know, just like anything, you need muscular strength to make up for tendon strength. If your muscles become so strong and your tendons are not caught up to the strength of your muscles, yes, that can happen.
Yeah. I can't remember where I saw it, but I remember something happened where, like, maybe it was like West Side Barbell versus the World. Have you ever seen that documentary by any chance? With like Louis Simmons and the guys? Oh, you would you would get a kick out of it, because what they used to do is a powerlifting thing, and they invented like West Side Barbell method and stuff. And one of the jokes that they had is they just welded on a set of 100-pound plates to a barbell, and that was the starting barbell. So you had to do 245 in everything you did as your starting weight. Otherwise, you couldn't work out there. And their goal essentially for the new guy that came in was to injure them.
Wow.
Like, that was the primary thing. And yeah, talk about a crazy rough group. But they what's
building
that?
A big roster of athletes there.
Yeah, they had like 5.
We had 100, but we're down to 2.
And one of the things was, like, they had said one guy, I think this was in bench press, because they were all powerlifters, and one guy was in bench press, and essentially his like forearm broke, and it was because everything else was like supporting so much weight, but like the bone actually couldn't support the weight, whether that was due to like overuse.
A fulcrum, you know, if you have weight on your whole forearm, and you know it's gonna break, you know, where the fulcrum is, where the stress point is. Sure.
Yeah, and that's what happened to quite a few of them. Judy Reed. Judy's awesome. She's always up in here. My daughter, 15, has decided to opt out of sports from now and only CrossFit 4 to 5 times a week. Oh, interesting.
That's neat. Yeah, I mean, whatever. There are kids who, you know, don't like team sports or don't like, you know, and CrossFit can be team sports certainly, but yeah, there's a lot of kids I know who love going to CrossFit because it's just, you know, they're in control of themselves. No one's screaming at them. No coaches telling them to go run a lap, or, you know, there are kids who are really comfortable CrossFitting and love it, and it's great. It's a great form of building up balance, agility, you know, those lists of 10 things. Oh yeah. Yep. Oh, I forgot about those lists of 10 things. Forgot about that.
Exactly. And the cool part about it is, and I mean, Judy's daughter's like 15 here, so she might be getting close to getting out of the high school sports within the next few years. But when kids are starting with the ACEs program and they do all the foundational exercises that we do in CrossFit, I tell them it's great because they're building a foundation that they're going to take with them for the rest of their lives. So if they
Right.
go on to play a college sport, or even if they don't, they just go on to continue to use the gym on their own, they'll have all the skills and the etiquette and knowing everything going into it. So they'll be able to take that with them wherever they go. And something
I
especially
mean,
like CrossFit.
not everybody's going to play college sports, and yeah, it's great. Not everybody's going to play high school sports.
Yeah.
So I think it's great.
And for us too, if anybody who's like coaching or owning that owns a gym out there as well, like starting one of these youth programs inside your gym is awesome, because we ended up getting a lot of people that didn't really do, like, they're like, oh, my kid was never interested in sports and we just wanted to be physical, so that we wanted to come and try this out. And they ended up loving it. And you get all the awesome side effects that normally come with kids in sports, meaning confidence level goes up, their activeness, their attention, their mood, their focus, like everything improves from that. Their sleep improves from that. And you don't necessarily need to expose them directly to an organized sport to be able to get that great stuff out of it. Like you could literally start them in some sort of CrossFit kids class or some sort of youth weightlifting or strength conditioning program with inside the CrossFit gym. And the cool thing is you're giving them the tools and the foundation that they can apply to anything if they do choose to go sports, or they just have it with them for the rest of their lives. I mean, how many people do we get in the gym all the time that's like, oh, the only thing I regret about CrossFit is I wish I found this in my 20s, or I wish I found this when I was playing sports, or,
Right.
And you're like, yep. Let's see what else we got here. Would soccer/gymnastics be the best combo for kids?
I don't think there's any best it depends on your child, depends on it depends on a lot of things. I don't think, I would never say that there's a best combination for a child. But I certainly would say, personally, the way I grew up and the way my kids grew up and the way I recommend is varying it up, shaking it up. Don't do one sport 365 days a year.
Yeah. I think sometimes people romanticize about the Michael Jordan stories or the Tiger Woods stories, where they were like these anomalies at like 4 years old. So they just went hardcore and like specialized into that sport. And I would say that the chances of your kid being Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan, just to burst you guys' boat there, is like close to zero. So like just face the music in that, right? But the more range you give your kids, like Savon's kids is a perfect example. Like they do jujitsu, they do Muay Thai, they do tennis, they do piano. They do weightlifting with some of their CrossFit stuff. They do swimming, they do surfing, right? Like there's all these different things that the kids are constantly in. Number one, by varying it, you're going to start to reduce the risk of just repetitive use injuries, because you're not just throwing the same ball all the time. But number two is like you're just giving them and exposing them to a range of stuff that allows them to kind of choose and find what really they want to sink their teeth into. And then as they get older, like if you want to specialize in something or make a run at like, going to college for a sport or something through your high school, like great. But yeah, that's, I agree. The range is the most important piece rather than just the combination. Did Two Brain guide you on how to start your kids program? No, they did not. I have a member of my gym, good friend of mine, been around for the last like 10, 11 years, who's heavily involved with a lot of the coaching of youth sports, kids baseball leagues, works with the basketball at the high school level and the baseball and football programs at the high school level. And he just saw the need for youth strength and conditioning that was done at a way that we were providing it, and that he was, experiencing it at the gym, and wanted to move it outside of just the PE weight rooms that was being offered. So that's kind of how our program ACEs came about. I'm not sure if Two Brain has they might have a kids thing. I'm not 100% sure on that. So to talk a little bit more about the competition stuff, are you going to the CrossFit Games this year, Doctor?
Yes, I am. Looking forward to it.
And this will be what number of games for you?
Oh, since 2011.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So be number
seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So give us a little bit of insight on that. I'm curious as to, number one, like when you're out there and you're watching the athletes, do any of them, or do you have any prior knowledge to like, hey doc, I want to let you know, like there was kind of something up with his shoulder. Like I think it's going to be okay. It's been bugging me a little bit, but can you check it before I go out there? Do they address you with anything like that as well too? Or is it pretty
Yeah.
much just like when
Yeah.
the wheels fall off the bus, you jump in?
Yeah, no. We get there early. We get there like 4 days, 5 days early to set up. We got the X-ray machine coming in. We got to get that set up, make sure that's in a good spot. Just walking the venue like anything. Like we are preparing for, sometimes we're preparing for a disaster, and not just the medical team, but, preparing for where are the exits, where are people going to be, where are we going to position? We're going to be on the field in a certain spot. We're going to have vision this way. We're going to have sight of vision of the athletes this way. At Madison and at Carson, the medical team was in 4 different spots at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of activities going on all at once, which is why it was sort of like a military, paramilitary fireman thing, like chain of command. Like you had a command, you had, different venues, and we had a central area where it's a scoop and carry mentality, as opposed to, oh, let's get, everybody out to where that person is. We bring the person to the central area. So we have a training area. We have tables. We have the X-ray. We got a room, a private room. But yeah, there are people who come ahead of time and have something coming into it, and they want to be evaluated. Is it okay? Am I safe to go? It's been however many weeks, and I just want to get checked out. So we have that. People are getting checked out ahead of time. And the one thing for games athletes out there that I've seen, there are a lot of games athletes who come in overtrained.
Mm.
They're banged up from doing too much, thinking, I've been doing this for a year. I just got to the games for the first time or the second time. I got to amp my training up. And I've seen a lot of people coming into the games limping. And that's not the position you want to be in if you're a games athlete. So
no.
So I would caution people out there. And there are veterans who know what they're doing, who sort of get the sense of it. But there are some people who don't know what they're doing, and they think they have to now ramp up they got to blow up their training to get to the games and to be good at the games. But you got to be cautious. Like anything, you got to be careful. You certainly don't want to come to the games thinking, I'm hurt or I'm injured and I wish I didn't do that. Like you got to come in feeling fresh, feeling rested, feeling great. Like, cause it's a week of like nothing you've ever seen before.
Yeah, because the volume ramps up, and some of those guys like end up just getting burnt out to a certain degree halfway through that week too. Yep. What's some of the most common things that you in the medical staff like deal with at the games, as far as like injuries, or is it a heat stroke thing? Like what's?
Yeah, so out in Carson there was heat. Everybody knew that. So anything I'm going to say is sort of been put out there. I'm not going to reveal any inner secrets or anything like that. But we saw in Carson, there were some hot days out there, and saw some heat issues in people. There's, the typical sports type thing. There's some knee sprains. There's some ankle sprains, people rolling their ankle just from running and on an uneven surface, or coming down from a rope or anything, twisting a knee, turning a knee. There's some tendon things from people, going, increasing, like some of the masters dudes. You got to be careful, masters out there, like the games. Just because you did something in training doesn't mean the crowd is going to get you 50 pounds more on your weighted pull-ups. Like, please be careful on your weighted pull-ups if that ever comes up. We see some issues there. What else? And then there's we've had some, and again, they've put it out there. We've had Brooke and her elbow. We've had Roman and his foot, and that was a whole an interesting scenario. And he detailed that well and on his blog. And so he talked about his 5th metatarsal fracture, but he also talked that he had a Lisfranc type fracture, which is a unique fracture of the foot that you have to be careful with, which is why we were talking about doing one-legged double unders. We didn't want him to do two-legged double unders just to protect it. And I think everything came out well with that. I was very happy that he sort of listened to my advice, and I didn't put him in a position where he was going to do more damage to himself. And it worked out well with the parallel bar, the seated sled pole, and then the double unders, so that we were going through the list of, okay, it's always what's the next workout, like what's the next workout. And if pull-ups were the next two events, he's home free, but it's the next workout was walking parallel on the parallel bars, and then a seated sled pull. And I heard this, I'm like, check, great. And I'm rooting for him, and then I hear double unders and my heart sank. And so again, I'm rooting for him. I want him to do well, but the goal of sports medicine is to protect the athlete from himself sometimes, or herself, and make sure they're not gonna either regret the decision or do more damage to their body in the future.
Yeah. And walk us through a little bit of that process. So like, let's start with Romans, and we'll stick with those two because I think like those are two very well documented injuries. Like Roman has talked about extensively, Brooke wrote a book about, and everything else.
There's everything. They've put out everything on it.
Right. So sticking with those two, and I like those two scenarios because in the sense of, so let's stick with Roman for a minute. So when that occurred, he knew something was up. So typically what happens from that? Did you notice it as well? And you're kind of like eyeing him, or does he kind of limp over to you and he's like,
no,
hey,
it happened at the end. It happened right at the end. There was a whole stream, there was a whole layer of people finishing, and he literally picked up the next weight, walked across the finish line. And once that happens, I check to make sure everybody's getting up and moving, and he wasn't saying much. And then over at the ice baths, Rosa came over and said, could you check him out? And I said, sure. And he showed me, and I said, okay, let's go get an x-ray. And we got the x-ray, and that sort of confirmed my suspicions. And then the issue is, okay, what's the next workout? Like, what are we doing? And, the issue was to protect him from hurting it more and not, doing more damage to himself. But also, hearing, it was tough too, because it was through Rosa. So it wasn't, it was a translation taking place. And, but obviously I know he would want to go no matter what, like, unless the bone is sticking through the skin, I know he wants to go. Yeah. And so my goal is to try to create first of all, a sense of trust. I'd never met Roman before. We never had any issues together. So like, let him know I'm on his side. Like, I want him to compete. I want him to be there. But I want him to understand the implications of it and what could happen if he does. And so we try to come to a joint conclusion, a joint decision, a shared decision making where we're working together. That's my goal, is to, be on their side, we're all pulling in the same direction. There are times when I or the medical team has to step in and say, you're going to really do significantly more damage to your body. And it's, we really cannot recommend that you keep, going, whether it's a heat injury, like you can't keep going through that. You can't push through a heat injury. Right. Or if it's a torn ACL, there are certain things that you're gonna do more damage. I don't know if you've ever seen some of the videos of people going back and trying to do things, and it turns out
way worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to educate and show them or talk to them and say, there are certain injuries that, you really should not, and we're not recommending that you go through.
So it does kind of come down to a joint discussion between you, your recommendations, what you're seeing, and giving them context as like, hey, here's what's going on with this injury. Here's where this could lead to if you keep going. We do think that it's going to cause catastrophic damage, or like it could, inhibit something that's going to affect you way longer in your career. So once you kind of give them that information, because most of those guys, like you said, unless a freaking bone is sticking through them, they're like, I'm good. One person that comes to mind was, this was 2016 maybe, was Annie Thor's daughter during the Murph, when they did it during the middle of that day, during the heat that year. And I remember she was like, guys, I'm like fine. And like when you watch the video back, she's like, clearly she's like not fine. It's like, it reminded me almost of and this is a poor comparison, Annie, I'm sorry, but it reminds me of like when you find that drunk guy and they're like leaving, you're like, hey, you're not driving, and they're like, I'm fine. Well, you guys are taking this shit too seriously. Like everybody around him is like, they should not be driving, right? Like that's what I remember her, because I mean, this is their time, this is their year, and they need to be able to stay in it as much as possible. And a lot of them, you have to like pry them away from it.
Mhm.
Has there, like with that one coming into mind, like you said, like there's nothing you could do with the heat stroke. So will you typically give like a little bit of time for that and say, okay, well, if you're not at
Yeah.
this markers at these times, or how does
Yeah.
that process go?
So say there's a muscle strain or a hamstring pull or a quad pull or something not as significant or severe, or a shoulder something, tweak or something partial and not dislocated, nothing like that.
Yeah.
What I like to do is to, nobody, like I'll have my guess and I'll have my sort of what's going to happen tomorrow. So sometimes, when the injury is during the day, you got 3 hours, you got 4 hours, come back and let's check it out. Like if it happens at 4 p.m. at night, you got a whole night of rest, a whole night of sleep. Come see me tomorrow. Like I'm never gonna in that immediate instance say like you're done. Like, if it's a mild soreness kind of thing like that, I'll never say you're done. I'll say, let's see how you feel tomorrow. Let's see how you feel in 4 hours. But so they, constantly I'm constantly reevaluating people backstage, which is why sometimes I'm not out on the field exactly. We're constantly reevaluating. So I will put them through the movements the next morning, say, knowing what the workout is. Say, okay, it's rope climbs, and you tweaked your elbow, or you tweaked your shoulder, or you tweaked your biceps. I want to see them actually perform the workout, the movements of the workout. It's just like, like a competition. Show me that you can do this. Like as a judge, show me that what you can do. Show me you have full range of motion. Show me that you're not going to hurt yourself. So then the decision becomes evident. Like they can't do a rope climb. They can't do a rope climb. Like there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, it's not on you at that point.
To make them do the rope climb. And that's good, because I like it doing it that way, because it lets the person see, it lets them try without 10,000 people screaming at them to try. It lets them try in the warm-up area where no one is seeing them, and everybody, is able to sort of get a feel like, I feel great. I feel good. I'm good to go. Thank you. Or, no, that wasn't good.
Yeah.
So that's the decision-making process that I use.
And those calls are like, I mean, they're always tough, and they're never easy when you do have to say like, okay, this clearly is it. And I think like, I like the way that you're doing it, because it reminds me kind of like some of the stuff that I do in coaching, where like you kind of already know the answer and you're like, I already know how this is going to play out, but you're giving them the space and the information for them to still come to that conclusion on their own. So even though you might see something that happens right away and you're like, oh shit, you're probably going to be done here. But like, without just coming out and saying that, you're like, okay, well, let's do this protocol. Let's try this. And then you reevaluate, tell me how this is going to feel. Okay. And typically when we have seen withdrawal, it's people that will go back, and then during that night, you'll get some, like you'll see it posted out, whether they do it on their Instagram or whether CrossFit makes an announcement. They're like, yeah, as soon as I got back to the hotel, I was hoping this would calm down. And in fact flared up. It got way worse, and we had to make that tough decision. And so I think that's really cool, because that gives us a lot of insight, because some of the stuff we've seen before where it's like so and so was forced to withdraw because of this, but then this person who seemed like they had the same injury or the same thing happened to them were still allowed to compete. And right away people kind of go to, oh, this is CrossFit forcing the rules on this person or that person. And now we know that it is a constant conversation, it's a reevaluation, and it's a joint discussion and decision between you and the athlete. And to me, that's the most important part, because that's exactly how it should be. It should be from the medical professional who's going to help and guide you and give you the information that you need to make the best decisions possible for your health. And that's really cool. And real quickly, let's touch base. So we saw, and I think this is the first one that I know of. In 2009, I remember they had this like rebar they had to hammer into the ground and like somebody smashed their finger on it. But outside of that, I think Brooks' injury with the snatch was the first one that it was like, oh shit, she is injured, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like, we've seen Pat Vellner fall off the top of a cargo net and you're like, then the dude just gets up and keeps charging like the freaking shit brick house he is. But, that was the first one where I didn't need a medical degree to know that Brooke was hurt. Like something was up with her elbow. So what typically does that protocol like look like?
Yeah, that is, someone's down in distress, medical comes out, evaluates whatever, and in Brooks' situation, it was clearly obvious. And the other part was there were no lanes. So as a medical team, if we have 8 lanes going, we have to be careful because we don't want to go out, number one, and hurt somebody else as we're running and someone's got an overhead front lunge and we run across 4 lanes of traffic and they, Justin Medeiros drops a 300-pound bar on you as you're trying to evaluate somebody next to you, so
Right.
So we literally stay in our lane. We literally come down the lane to avoid getting hit by others or interfering with somebody else's competition. That's, we definitely don't want to do that. Like,
Right.
And then with Brooke, it was obvious there was one person on a platform. You just run right out to her. But that's sort of our other, thing that we always have to tell the people out there is that we have to stay in our lane, exit in our lane too. You can't just exit across 5 lanes of traffic.
Yeah.
It's not Frogger. We're going up and down our lanes.
Yeah.
So this CrossFit is different than a football game or a soccer game that I cover too. Football game, athlete goes down, ref blows the whistle, all play stops. You run out in a beeline to the athlete, as fast as you can. Like this is, you gotta, pause, think about where the athlete is, where everybody else is, where are you going, where are you, where is your pathway in there?
Yeah.
But yeah, Brooks was tough. It was, sometimes you get an elbow dislocation, you can pop it back in without them even knowing it, as you're just looking at it and grabbing it. She had a big, thick band on her elbow that I think was, preventing some of the reduction to get it back in place. And then in the other part is, her muscles are big. She's got very big muscles. So,
yep.
We got some assistance with my partner, Dr. Osich, and we went into the room and we did, as she wrote in her book, we injected her elbow to numb it up, to relax the pain that she was in. She was in a lot of pain. And as you saw, and the lidocaine instantly numbed up her pain, and we were able to get it back in easily after that. So, but again, that's in her book. She wrote about that. So there's no secret to that.
Yeah. And because I remember for some reason there was like, when it first happened, people were like, oh my gosh, they saw it. And CrossFit stood there because you see Adrian like take a knee and like call it in. And I was like, they couldn't have moved any faster. Like it happened. Adrian took a knee. She was on the ground and you guys were boom. You were on top of it and getting her the care.
I heard a lot of that. It took me time to get out there. And the people forget there were 10 people that night who dumped in the same exact dump. So if you want me running out for every athlete who dumps a bar, I'm running out there for every athlete who's on their back, lying on the ground after they dump the bar. Like, that's not a good look either. But
you would constantly be doing like the back and forth. And the thing is too,
I got to work on my sprints. I got my long distance. Now I got to work on my sprints. So.
And the last thing you want is you running out like having a hammy thing or something because you came too quick. You're like, another one's down. Oh, shit. Look, we told you CrossFit was no good. But I commend you guys because when we watched that back, we did it on one of the podcasts and like all of us were sitting there watching it. And we're like, there is literally nothing else. Like, unless you preemptively knew that that was going to take place, I don't think that situation could have been addressed any quicker and handled any more professionally. Like, and she wrote about it in the book and she talked about it extensively afterwards that you were on top of it. By the time she was like even realizing kind of, oh shit, this has happened and this is an injury, it was handled. She was in the care she needed, and boom.
Right.
And I mean, I don't think you could ask for a better response or a better response time than
Yeah.
that. And I think a lot of it too has to come down to like typically athletes get scared when that happens. I mean, you see your
Sure.
whole like you get that, you're like, oh crap, this is a big pop. I'm laying here in the middle of this competition and like my whole weekend is over. What is this gonna mean for me? I mean, you get that rush of like all those thoughts coming in right away. And how much is like, with that being said, like when you come in and you deal with an athlete, how much of it is kind of just that mental side of just letting them know, like, hey, we got you. You know, we're going to take a look at
Yeah,
this and things.
it's funny. There are some athletes like I've had some football games with like an open tibia fracture where tibia's sticking through the skin,
No.
and the guy is on his back, and I go over and I gently just take it and I line it up, just nicely so it's no one's throwing up on the field. Some of the players start throwing up.
That
And I
would be
just
me.
grab it and just sort of just line it up gently and make sure it looks like it, the foot's pointing up and the legs in a line. And but sometimes the shock doesn't set in, the pain doesn't set in. There are literally, I've talked to athletes and they're like, so what do you think? Is it going to be all right? Am I going to be able to go back? And I'm like, well, let's just give it some time here, and you just try to calm them down. And
Yeah.
let's just we're gonna get you off the field, and we're gonna get the ambulance. And they're like, really, ambulance? Why? What's going on? I'm like, oh, just keep just lie down, you'll be fine.
Protocol, don't worry.
But literally, I've been having a conversation in the same tone that you and I are having a conversation with, where a guy has an open tibia fracture.
Yeah.
And it's weird that they don't. It takes probably 10 minutes to kick in, I would say sometimes.
And then they're like,
some people are screaming bloody murder, but I've had others where it's just they're not reacting at all for like 10 minutes. It's interesting.
yeah, that isn't interesting. That awesome, great. I think I love these little chats with you. The last one we did was really cool on like the coach athletes, and I know we want to touch a little bit on the competitive side for our chat this time. And I would love to be able to snag you again for a little bit of time after the games, because I'm sure we'll have some cool points of discussion and everything that's in there, and a lot of the stuff too. I got a bunch of Q&A questions as well that
Sure.
kind of came out of this, so I think yeah, I mean, like, as far as does one of the ones that came out was like, does sport belong inside the affiliate? Which was an interesting question, and I thought that it was one of those like, should we be pushing people to compete at any level? Like, should we keep that to the open? Like, what is your, I mean, we talked a little bit about it before, but what was your opinion on that?
So the question was, in an affiliate, should you be asking people to get into the games and try to
or pushing them to
athlete?
or pushing them to do a local comp or something like that? Or
I wouldn't push anybody to do a local comp. No, that's sort of, I would call that organic growth. Like, if I would say that there's going to be a certain percentage of people based on their personality who are like, yeah, I want to see how I do against other people, not from our box. Like, I'm tired of competing against people in our box. I feel confident enough with a lot of the movements, and that's got to be important too. Like, you can't put somebody into an elite level, and if they're, you got to guide them. Are they elite? Are they RX? Are they scalers? Are they beginners? Like, hopefully, a lot of the competitions have that, division. But yeah, I certainly think I wouldn't push anybody into competition. I would let them make that call on their own.
Yeah, and then hopefully give them the right guidance with your coaching and everything else to make sure that they're not jumping too far ahead of what they're actually capable of.
But I will say, when I was competing, it was just a great, fun weekends, fun days, great team building, amazing camaraderie that you build with your friends who are competing for the first time in a competition. I will say those were some of my funnest weekends in CrossFit, was when I was competing. Yeah.
Yeah, but also too, just keeping the main thing, right? Even if you're
Yeah.
in that
Oh yeah.
competition, still
Yeah, no doubt.
recognizing. And then as far as like resting, so the individual with this one is like, I know a little bit of the backstory, but they've been having like a shoulder issue for a while. Mostly comes up in dynamic gymnastic stuff. Like I could do a strict pull up, it doesn't bother me. But if I start swinging and go to do like toe to bar or like a kipping pull up, now I start to feel the pain again. Typically, what should a resting period be for that to actually say, okay, am I resting it and that is making an improvement on my
Yeah.
situation, or is it, do I need something else
Yeah.
other than rest?
I would give something without a trauma, without something that went rip, tear, pop. If it was just overtraining, I would say that in 2 to 4 weeks of modifying, doing other stuff, sit-ups, lower body stuff, 2 to 4 weeks of modifying should help an overuse injury, like a tendonitis. And if you're still experiencing things and pain after 2 to 4 weeks, then getting it evaluated seems reasonable.
Yeah. And then as far as getting back into the exercise once they've done that, given it the 2 or 4 weeks and not feeling it. So should they start a little bit slower, keep things strict, less dynamic at first, or?
Yeah, definitely start slower, lighter, stricter. Yeah. I'll tell people with a tendonitis, like, wait. And once you feel really, really good, like once you feel like I'm good to go, wait another week.
Okay. That's good. Good advice there.
People sometimes come back and they re-irritate it, re-aggravate it. And then you're not back to square one, but you're back to modifying again.
Yeah, exactly. And the next one here was on like range of motion stuff. So if you have somebody who comes in that might not have like no pain, there's no pain anywhere, but there's clearly like a restriction in, like, let's say the hips, right? In this example. And so they go to squat, they can't necessarily reach full range of motion yet. Mechanically, other than, like depth, everything seems to be okay. Should that individual just work on slowing it down, getting the full range of motion in there prior to increasing weight? Or, and I guess the question comes down to, like, if I'm missing the range of motion, I don't have full range of motion, I keep adding weight to my back squat, let's say, is that going to further inhibit range of motion in the future? And will that also lead to injury?
I guess the question is, why do they not have full range of motion? Is it they're just a tight person and their ligaments are tight? Do they have arthritis in their hip? If someone, has a diagnosis of arthritis in their hip and it's a mechanical block, the bone just literally cannot move, there's going to be a limited motion. And then, you try to find a happy area where you can lift weights still without drilling your bone up against your bone. Like, you keep drilling your bone up against your bone's going to react and get painful. There's going to be swelling in the bone. It's like if I took my elbow and I just banged it up and down against the wall, like, my elbow is going to hurt after a while, right? Same kind of thing. So, if someone has a diagnosis of arthritis and that's given them a loss of range of motion, then keeping the weights reasonable, doing exercises, keep exercising, keep it moving, but don't get to the point where you're pushing through pain. That's the important part. If you have like a labral tear of a hip, sometimes just avoiding, and it's a new diagnosis of a labral tear of a hip. Sometimes labral tears of hips quiet down. Sometimes they can heal if it's a real small one. But if you stop pinching that labrum and below 90, and you don't go below 90 with a labrum for sometimes 2 months, of seeing people come back without having surgery and feeling better, and the labrum pain stops hurting. So that certainly can happen.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Dr. Sean Rockett, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Like I said, I'm excited. We'll get you back on after the games here and kind of discuss some of that stuff as well. And like I said, I get a lot out of these conversations just on a personal thing, and I know everybody else does too, for some of the feedback we get. So I enjoy these quite a bit. And cool. I'll see you in a few weeks.
Sounds good. We'll see you, buddy.
We'll be at the games. All righty. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sean Rockett. We'll get an applaud here on the way out.
You gotta do like a rocket.
I'll get that sound effects for next one. We just have the air horn now. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Have a great day. All righty, guys. Mr. Dr. Sean Rockett. Oh, man, so many cool insights on that one as far as like the procedures and the conversations that go back and forth between the games and the athletes. And it was really cool to be able to get that insight from him. So I hope you guys got something out of it just as much as I do in every one of these conversations, because all you coaches and gym owners, like it is our responsibility to make sure that we are, Troy, was it? Land the plane sound. It is our responsibility to make sure that we are doing everything we can do as affiliate owners and coaches to dispel some of these myths that CrossFit injures you, blah, 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 blah. Because if we come in and we set people up with the right foundation at the right start, we know that this is the most effective exercise program that anybody could have and will keep them injury free. And we'll end with this. Froggy Will Souza just dropping in any advice for new members coming in for their first class when the class is super full. How do I make sure it doesn't run behind, but still give everybody enough tension? Here's what we did. We put a second coach at those classes and we funneled everybody to that class, because the last thing you want to do is introduce somebody to a class that is super full, because two things happen. Number one, you have to make the choice to either slow down that whole entire class for that individual. They're going to feel really weird about it because they could sense that happening. Or number two, you're just doing flyby check-ins with them, which means that they're going to feel lost in that first class and they're going to feel like everybody gets it but me. So my suggestion is, first off, if you can, try to see if we could have a second coach come to the busier classes where you know you have new people coming in. And if you open up the whole entire thing to anybody could come in and, you know, yada, yada, yada at any time, then you're bringing yourself to the risk of having somebody come into a really busy class and making it really tough on you or the coach and making it tough on that new member. So I would say just kind of look at the system in which you're bringing new people in. And if you can, please put a second coach to that can kind of do this hand-holding thing and give that new member the extra attention that they not only need, but they deserve as their new spot coming into CrossFit. That is my advice. That's kind of the things that we've done that have worked well for us. Alrighty, gang, I'm off to go coach a class now. I got my class here in about 15 minutes. Fired up to coach it. Coached already 4 classes this morning. Knocked out 2 podcasts. Keeping the good times rolling. Alrighty, guys, thank you so much for joining me again. I hope you guys got a lot out of this with Dr. Sean Rockett, and we'll be having him back shortly after the games. Have a great day, y'all. Bye-bye.